BBOR Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia. BlackBoxOnlineRadio on Instagram for the bonus podcast. And welcome to BBOR, the home of true crime talk radio and your premier destination for unsolved mysteries, criminal psychology, and exploring the dark side of cyberspace. My name is Ned DeHaan, and I am your host, as well as the creator of Astro Psych 400 here on YouTube, and regular contributor to the Zodiac Killer channel. And a great way to support these shows is just by listening to some more content. But you can also go over to Amazon.com and have a look at the book Killer on a White Horse, written by me, Ned DeHaan. It is a novel, murder mystery, inspired by the Zodiac Manson connection, but it is indeed fictional. However, who doesn't love a good mystery? And there is always the TeeSpring page. Feel free to check out some of the merchandise. And remember, being weird is not a crime. Let the show begin. Okay, hello everybody. Today is Monday, another Zodiac Monday. Welcome to the show. How's everybody doing? Just a couple of quick announcements and reminders before we truly begin. The first is I would like to give a big thank you to everyone who listened to the episode about Elliot Rodger, which was a very short episode. I've been trying to make some YouTube shorts, and I made one that was 1 minute and 13 seconds long instead of 1 minute long, so I decided to upload it here on the regular video page. But also, please feel free to visit the Black Box Online Radio Shorts page here on YouTube. The shorts are coming out regularly, and they are just some very brief true crime stories, and sometimes it's just small observations about the true crime world that are being shared, and it's just a different way to follow along and explore this type of content. Also, the shorts are being released on the Facebook page. My personal Facebook is in the description box, as well as BlackBoxOnlineRadio on Instagram. You can follow along with everything using those three pages, and soon I will be promoting the Twitter page for the show. Twitter is going to be somewhat of an antique. All the kids are using their TikTok now, or whatever that is. I do not have TikTok, but perhaps I will be exploring that one in the near future. And as always, you can hit the like button and subscribe here on YouTube. It's a great way to help out the show for free. And anyone can support this show at BuyMeACoffee.com. BuyMeACoffee.com/BlackBoxOnlineRadio allows you to make a donation or contribution to help support the program. And anybody who makes a donation will get a shout out here on Zodiac Monday. First, I would like to begin with something that is true Zodiac news, because this is indeed the Zodiac Killer News Report. And there are two new videos out on the channel Real Zodiac Killer Revealed 2023, which is run by a guy named Adam who is promoting his Zodiac suspect, John Parr Cox. Now, I have said very clearly in some previous episodes that I think that John Parr Cox has some of the closest matching handwriting to the Zodiac Killer that I have ever seen. He lived in the vicinity of the Presidio Heights shooting, that's the final crime committed by the Zodiac Killer, and he also worked for the Santa Fe Railroad, which had posters that featured some symbols that are rather similar to the ones used in the Zodiac ciphers. Now, I want you to go over to his channel and watch his videos, of course, but I would like to share some things that he promoted on his channel. Why did the Zodiac Killer choose the dates of Zodiac activity? Why those particular dates? Well, the one possible reason could be that the date of December 20th, 1968 had a certain significance to him. The date of December 20th, that is. In December of 1967, 1 year prior to the Zodiac Killer's first crime on December 20th of 1968, there was a newspaper article that went out that talked about something in the life of John Parr Cox. John Parr Cox was somebody who was an avid hunter. He hunted on a big game preserve that was on private land. And an article went out in the paper on December 20th of 1967 stated that his hunting preserve had to have been sold. It was a forced sale to the government. And, I mean, the Zodiac Killer would then go on to say that he liked hunting people because it was more fun than hunting wild game in the forest, because man was the most dangerous animal of all. I mean, how beaten up was he about the hunting preserve that he went on to become a real-life murderer 1 year after the article was in the paper? That I'm not 100% sure of, and I don't have the best explanation for that. But this idea of how somebody used to be a big game hunter, his private hunting preserve was gone, therefore he had to start hunting people, which is an absolutely sickening and disturbing thing to talk about. But yes, that is indeed something that was shared on Adam's channel, and it's one of the reasons why the date of December 20th, 1968 was chosen for the Zodiac killer's first crime, the Lake Herman Road murders, which saw the deaths of David Faraday and Betty Lou Jensen. I will entertain this, but I will also propose some alternatives, and that would be that one of my own genuine observations, Lake Herman Road took place on 12/20 of 68, December 20th, 1968. If you add up 12/20 and 68, what do you get? 100. The second Zodiac killer crime took place on July 4th of 1969 with the Blue Rock Springs shooting, 7/4/69. Okay, you add that up. 7 plus 4 is 11, plus 69 is 80. Okay, so you have 100 and you have 80. The final Zodiac crime took place on October 11th of 1969. 10 plus 11 plus 69 equals 90, right? Yeah, 10 plus 69 equals 79 plus 11 is 90. So you have 80, 90, and 100. Now, the only one that doesn't work out perfectly would be Lake Berryessa, right? September 27th of 1969. It doesn't fit into the 70, 80, 90, 100 or something like that. But I believe it was Wildfire99 in the comment section who pointed out that the Zodiac killer didn't draw a 9 on the car door at Lake Berryessa. He wrote out the word SEPT, which is obviously for September. But Wildfire's observation was that it's actually the number 7. SEPT is the French word set, meaning 7. So when you have 7 plus all of the other digits in there, 7 plus 27 plus... or 7 plus 2 plus 7 plus 6 plus 9 plus 6 plus 3 plus 0 plus 6, because it says Sept 27, 69, 6:30 p.m. by knife, it totals up to 40. The numbers themselves total 33, and then plus 7 equals 40. So then you actually have one of these numbers that rounds off rather smoothly. And it's almost as if, say, for example, if you were to divide the Zodiac killer's symbol into 4 different quadrants, which it does naturally, then you would have 3 of them belonging into one quadrant that could be for crimes committed by gun. One of them would fit into a different quadrant that would be for crimes committed by knife, and maybe there was one that committed by rope and then one by fire. And I'm saying all this because the Zodiac killer would mail in something in 1970 that was called the Halloween card that said by rope, by knife, by gun, by fire, which has since been attributed to a Tim Holt comic called The Wheel of Death. Or that's how we refer to it as. It's the Wheel of Death. It's actually a larger literary theme featuring someone called Lady Doom, who is the Lady of Situations. But yes, it's a death wheel, the Wheel of Death. And I mean, imagine just for a second that there is a mathematical reason why someone is choosing these dates and times, that they want to have certain crimes committed by gun, certain crimes committed by knife, and maybe there's only one crime committed by knife, and that it's all chosen for mathematical reasons. Imagine something like degrees on a compass, or the hands on a clock. 3 of them are going into one quadrant, and 1 of them is going into a different quadrant, and there are 0 that have been revealed in the 2 other quadrants. That's my own observation, partnered with some things from you guys in the comments section. And there's even another one that, again, another one of my own observations about why December 20th was chosen. I believe that the Zodiac killer was heavily inspired by Jack the Ripper. And the Ripper committed, well, it's not really the Ripper. There was a murder that took place on December 20th of 1968, and that was the murder of Rose Milett in England. Now, some people don't believe that Rose Milett was actually murdered by the Ripper. I don't think that she was murdered by the Ripper. And the Ripperologist Martin Fido talked about this on his show Murder After Midnight, even stating that he thought that Rose Milett was not murdered at all. He stated that he thought that she died of a seizure. But yes, that's a lesser-known Ripper crime that took place on December 20th of 1888, and then the Zodiac killer commits a crime on December 20th of 1968. I suppose anything's possible, but one more time, I would invite you to look at the videos on Adam's channel, Real Zodiac Killer Revealed 2023. And in this next segment, I would like to give a shout out to Sam Fisher, who is the author of Zodiac Killer Identity, and he talks about Joseph Paul Franklin as a Zodiac killer suspect. To you guys who have been following the Zodiac Monday episodes, you'll know that I've mentioned Sam Fisher and his books in a couple different Zodiac Killer news reports. However, I had the opportunity to correspond with him via email. Anybody could write the show at BlackBoxOnlineRadio@AOL.com. My email address is in the description box. And I sent him somewhat of a stock question interview, and I will read the questions off first, and then I will read Sam Fisher's responses. Firstly, I, of course, asked him, what made you suspect that Joseph Paul Franklin was the Zodiac? The second question is, in your book, The Zodiac Killer Identity, why did you leave out that your suspect had a nickname, the Racist Killer? And that was my biggest takeaway from reading the book. Not once did he mention that his suspect had the nickname, the Racist Killer. He talks about how Joseph Paul Franklin was a real serial killer, and was also a serial killer who traveled around to different parts of the country, one of these types of coast-to-coast killers. But he did not mention that he had the name the Racist Killer. That goes to the next question. Joseph Paul Franklin was a serial killer who primarily targeted blacks. How do you explain that the Zodiac Killer did not target black people? Now, the next one. Joseph Paul Franklin would have been an older teenager at the time of the Zodiac murders, age 18 to be exact. What is your response to critics who say that the Zodiac Killer would have been older than that, say late 20s to early 40s? The next question is, how likely is it that the Zodiac Killer murdered Tammy Jo Alexander on a scale of 1 to 10? Tammy Jo Alexander was murdered in 1979, and it's very important to note that she is not a victim that has been connected to Joseph Paul Franklin, but Sam Fisher proposes that Joseph Paul Franklin was the Zodiac Killer, and he was indeed the murderer of Tammy Jo Alexander, therefore she would be a Zodiac Killer victim, but her murder is unsolved to this day. And the next question is, do you believe that Joseph Paul Franklin did indeed commit the attempted murder of Larry Flynt? And yes, that's Larry Flynt from Hustler magazine. And the reason why I added in that question is, it doesn't appear that there's an enormous amount of physical evidence that connects Joseph Paul Franklin to the the attempted murder, I repeat, attempted murder of Larry Flynt, but he confessed to it, and that crime has been attributed to him. So, I would like to read Sam Fisher's responses that he has composed for this episode, and once again, I do thank him for taking the time to go through all of these and to compose his responses. Firstly, what made you suspect that Joseph Paul Franklin was the Zodiac? He says, I first saw an article on how the capture of the Golden State Killer could lead to a potential break in the Zodiac case. I clicked on the link to the Zodiac case, and I noticed that there were many aspects that pointed to Nazi ideology, such as the dates of letters being mailed on November 8th and November 9th, being the anniversary of the Beer Hall Putsch, and on Hitler's birthday for the mailing of the Z-13. The symbol he used is also a symbol used by white supremacists and Nazis as well. I googled Nazi serial killers from the 1970s and his name popped up. Interestingly, I counted the number of letters in his name, and it was 18, the same as the Z-18 from the Z-408. That's the final line of the Z-408, mind you. And after learning that his birth name was 13 characters, same as the Z-13, I kept researching. And, I mean, all of those actually do sound like solid reasons, and I'll talk about the Zodiac Killer symbols later on, and what he's talking about, how the Zodiac symbol could be a Nazi symbol. But I really wanted to get to the question about why he would write a book about Joseph Paul Franklin and not mention that he was the racist killer. And in your book, The Zodiac Killer Identity, why did you leave out that your suspect had a nickname, the Racist Killer? I think the main reason for this is that his crimes were acts of terrorism, but race was the underlying reason why he committed these acts. I think the name the Racist Killer is an oversimplification of what he was trying to achieve. He had one goal, and it was to start a race war, perhaps a revolution of some kind in the United States. Plus, he killed white women and tried to kill Larry Flynt, so whites he considered race traitors and were also on the list of potential targets. The next question was, Joseph Paul Franklin was a serial killer that primarily targeted blacks. How do you explain that the Zodiac Killer did not target blacks? And yes, he has alluded to that in the first one, but, I mean, as he already stated, not all of Joseph Paul Franklin's victims were African-American, but that was a big target of us, and he admitted to this very publicly that he wanted to target black people. Joseph Paul Franklin did not have any issue killing whites, whom he deemed as race traitors or interracial couples and Jews. He was a big fan of Charles Manson, and Manson killed white people thinking that it would incite a race war. Also, in one interview, he did compare himself to people in the Bible who justified killing anyone as long as he believed it was God's will. So, for example, he said Samson of the Bible brought down the city of the Philistines, and he believed that he was acting in a similar fashion. Magazines promoting Nazism and things did point to young people of the day as being very aligned with the values of communism, and I don't think he would have had any issue, even at a young age, particularly in a liberal area like San Francisco, with killing and sending out a message to get his message out. By the way, I don't actually think Manson believed this stuff about the race war. This is my own interjection. But he definitely talked about it. At least when you hear the stories from some people in the Manson family, and when I read the book My Life with Charles Manson, there's definitely a lot of discussion about Charles Manson was saying stuff about the race war, but I don't think he believed it in his heart and soul, but that's just me. Back to the comments here from Sam Fisher. Odd fact, one tattoo artist later said that Franklin wanted to get a tattoo of blood dripping onto the words Helter Skelter, maybe from his Grim Reaper tattoo, which already had blood dripping. I don't think he ever got it, though. And then the next question was, Joseph Paul Franklin would have been an older teenager at the time of the Zodiac murders. What is your response to critics who say that the Zodiac killer should have been older, late 20s to early 40s? And Sam Fisher says that that's a valid point, but I do believe there is some indication of a younger Zodiac, as Brian Hartnell said that he could be a student, and one of the dispatchers did mention someone in their 20s as well. Yes, Brian Hartnell estimated that the voice of the Zodiac killer that he heard at Lake Berryessa, which would have been behind the Lake Berryessa costume mask, he said up age 20 to 30. After researching Franklin, I have turned up some indication that he was traveling the country as early as 18 and claiming to be in trucking, at least. I don't think anyone has a clear picture of where he was at his late teenage years, which I find intriguing. Generally, the best I can do is determine that he was in Georgia around age 16. I think age 17 or 18 he became involved with the Nazi Party and started traveling the country as a trucker. Two separate accounts of when he joined the Alabama National Guard as well, one book having him in the Guard at age 17 and another at age 27. So his life is simply filled with a lot of open spaces that don't add up. By his own admission in one interview, he was asked about what age did you first think about killing, and his response was age 17. In 1967, he stated that he started thinking about killing. So, I mean, that is, that is a strong point in favor of Sam Fisher's case. I'll give him that. And the next one, how likely is it that the Zodiac killer murdered Tammy Jo Alexander on a scale of 1 to 10? And Sam Fisher's response is, I am less confident on this one than I used to be, but I still think it is a possibility. I'll go with a 6 or 7 for me on that one. I think the sketch is interesting. Another reason I felt that Franklin could have been the killer is the MO in keeping what happened with the girls in West Virginia. In the Rainbow murders, after asking if they could sleep with a black man, he ordered them out of the car at gunpoint, but they refused, and he shot them. He was traveling the East Coast at the time. Okay, though, and when you see this particular image that has been going by on Black Box Online Radio, it's even featured as the thumbnail in one of the Zodiac Killer news reports. It is the sketch of a man who was seen with Tammy Jo Alexander prior to her murder in 1979. And yes, it's a very, very basic sketch. It doesn't even show any recognizable facial features except for the hair. But, I mean, that's the sketch, and he thinks that that could be Joseph Paul Franklin, and that Tammy Jo Alexander would fit the pattern that Franklin would have, the pattern that Franklin was using about targeting people, luring them to areas, committing the murders, and more or less just, I mean, Tammy Jo Alexander had her body just left in a cornfield for a while, and for a long time she was just called the girl in the cornfield. The next question is, do you believe that Joseph Paul Franklin did indeed commit the attempted murder of Larry Flynt? And Sam Fisher's response is, yes, I believe he pretty much confessed to it. Larry Flynt always believed so as well, but even though he confessed, there was never much of a need to go through a trial for a guy who was already on death row. Interestingly, the only reason they found out was because of his confession. Otherwise, the attempted murder of Larry Flynt would have been a mystery. I think also that he knew the details only the shooter would know, so the consensus is that it was indeed Franklin. Oh yes, and I don't have any strong doubts about that as well. I just thought it was odd that, as Sam Fisher just stated, the only real piece of evidence or connection to the attempted murder of Larry Flynt is his own admission. So, of course, that creates a little bit of room for skepticism, but I don't see any reason why Joseph Paul Franklin would not have been the attempted assassin of Larry Flynt. And here's a final concluding message from Sam Fisher, one more time, author of Zodiac Killer Identity. He says, more points of interest. Not sure if you know this, but he did in one interview refer to hunting his victims. He said, like wild game. I found it interesting that his father was a butcher, so two things of interest that can explain wild game. That comment, plus knowing how to hog-tie people, perhaps. John Douglas considered to be the only person that truly disturbed him. Oh, Douglas considered the only person that truly disturbed him. I think he means that John Douglas, the FBI profiler, said the only person that disturbed him was Joseph Paul Franklin. And speaking of John Douglas, he is the author of The Killer's Shadow. This is a book that was co-authored Mark Olshaker, and I would like to read the description of that book for you from Amazon.com. The legendary FBI criminal profiler and international best-selling author of Mindhunter and The Killer Across the Table returns with this timely, relevant book that goes to the heart of extremism and domestic terrorism. Worshippers stream out of a Midwestern synagogue after Sabbath services, unaware that they are only 100 yards away from an expert marksman, an avowed racist, anti-Semite, and member of the Ku Klux Klan who patiently awaits his hunting rifle at his side. The October 8th, 1977 shooting was a forerunner of the tragedies and divisiveness that plagues us today. John Douglas, the FBI's pioneering full-time criminal profiler, hunted the shooter, a man named Joseph Paul Franklin, whose Nazi-inspired beliefs propelled a 3-year reign of terror across the United States, targeting African Americans, Jews, and interracial couples. In addition, Franklin bombed the home of Jewish leader Morris Amitay, A-M-I-T-A-Y, Amitai perhaps, shot and paralyzed Hustler magazine publisher Larry Flint, and seriously wounded civil rights leader Vernon Jordan. The fugitive supported his murderous spree, robbing banks in 5 states from Georgia to Ohio. Douglas and his writing partner, Mark Olshaker, returned to this disturbing case that reached the highest levels of the Bureau, which was fearful. Franklin would become a presidential assassin, and haunted him for a couple of years to come as the threat of a copycat domestic terrorist as killers increasingly became a reality. Detailing the dogged pursuit of Franklin that employed profiling, psychology, and meticulous detective work, Douglas and Olshaker relate how the case was a make-or-break test for the still experimental behavioral science unit and revealed a new type of determined, mission-driven serial killer whose only motivation was hate. Riveting cautionary tale rooted in history that continues to echo today. The Killer's Shadow is a testifying and essential exploration of the criminal personality and the vile grip of extremism. And one more time, the book is called The Killer's Shadow by FBI profiler John Douglas and Mark Olshaker. And moving on to the next segment here on Black Box Online Radio, one of you guys in the comments section was talking about the murder of Donna Marie Frizzley. And is it possible that Donna Frizzley was the first victim of the Zodiac killer? First, from just a little bit of Googling, I saw that her name was Donna Marie Frizzley, but she actually went by Donna May. And there's an article that was written about her death over on Substack.com. This is a website that I've never used before, and it was written by Luigi Warren, just citing the source. It's called Murder in the Desert. A brief overview of the unsolved murder of Donna Marie Frizzley. The victim was 14 years old, and she was abducted from a home in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, located in the Antelope Valley about 70 miles north of Los Angeles, at around 1 a.m. on February 13th of 1962 while babysitting. Now, some of you will note that this is even before the murder of Ray Davis, which took place in April of 1962. That's why some people think that this could be the first victim of the Zodiac killer. A neighbor later reported hearing Donna laughing, then screaming around the time that she was abducted. One of her shoes was left behind, and an overturned radio at the scene suggested that she left under duress. Now, this concept of laughing, just because somebody hears a scream that sounds like it's playful or it sounds like someone's joking around, that does not mean that it's a playful scream. I was just talking about this on Black Box Online Radio when I was looking into the case of Jared Atadero, because he was out hiking with his family in Colorado and they heard this playful scream, and they think that he was either abducted or attacked and killed by mountain lions or predators. However, the reason why people didn't investigate more closely is because they just heard a playful scream and it sounded like somebody joking around. But in all seriousness, it most likely was not. It was actually probably a scream for help, and he was just paralyzed with fear, so to speak. Just because it sounds playful does not mean that it is. A massive manhunt ensued after the girl was reported missing. Her fully clothed body was discovered in a shallow grave near an abandoned gold mine in the desert of East Palmdale, about 30 miles from Lancaster. The victim had been dragged and assaulted and buried at the site, sexually assaulted, despite the earlier reports saying that she was stabbed and bludgeoned and her throat was slit. Police believe that she fought her killer and possibly inflicted a groin injury. And this is the stuff that I wanted to share with you guys, because the person who left us in the comment section, and I don't have it in front of me or else I would give you a shout out, they said that this could be a reason why the Zodiac killer chose to stop sexually assaulting the victims, because one of them fought back very viciously and injured his groin, and then that's just the signal to him, do not ever do this again. But what do you think? You can put your ideas in the comments section down below. A highly publicized early lead involved a mystery man observed by the TWA stewardess Georgia Shaw on a Los Angeles-New York flight on Valentine's Day, the day after Donna went missing. The tight-lipped passenger marked up an annotated LA Times story about the case using a ballpoint pen and left the newspaper behind before exiting the plane. Well, you got to do a lot more than that before you have some type of story to share. An extensive search was made for the well-dressed 50-ish prime suspect, and 2 identikit composites were released to the press, but there seems to be nothing to indicate that he was ever found. Other suspects failed to pan out, and the case went cold. I mean, I totally get how they want to do the whole thing of leaving no stone unturned, but, I mean, someone made some markings on a newspaper. You gotta have more than that. And the website CaliSphere.org has an image of where the body of Donna Marie Frizzly was found and how she was dumped and how she was left there. And it actually just has a small thing that the project was supported in whole by the U.S. Institute Museum of Library Sciences, and they wanted to share this because it was made possible by a grant from the John Randolph and Dora Haynes Foundation. So I guess there is some reasons how those things can actually benefit the true crime world. And over on Tapatalk, it talks about how Donna Marie Frizzly had been beaten about the head, stabbed, and her throat had been slit. She was fully clothed and had not been sexually molested. I mean, that's a contradicting statement that we've heard from that other source, but it does seem that she fought back and injured the perpetrator, and that she was someone who decided to fight back. Yeah, it says that as well here. She injured the perpetrator. Okay, so what are the immediate responses? Number 1. The Zodiac killer didn't target victims this young. Number 2, the Zodiac killer didn't attempt sexual assaults. Number 3, the Zodiac killer didn't abduct the victims. But I completely follow this line of thinking where someone is going to propose that the Zodiac tried these types of activities and then had a terrible experience. It was like, absolutely not, I'm going to go after people in vulnerable places, like Ray Davis in the back of his taxi cab, or like Robert Domingos and Linda Edwards at Gaviota Beach. But you'd have to think, if the Zodiac can fight Robert Domingos in a fist fight and not get completely pulverized, could he not fight off 14-year-old Donna Marie Frizzly? It's something that I think is rather inconsistent. But here's something else that is more important. These types of crimes happen all the time. Abductions, especially abductions of somebody who's around age 14. Young women, older girls, and they are lured to places where they are in a vulnerable situation. They are murdered, they're beaten, and their throats are slit. Terrible, terrible things. Rest in peace to Donna Frizzly. But opportunistic predators exist, and I think that this crime is much more significant of an opportunistic predator. But the possibility that that person had a connection to the nearby Air Force base that is mentioned in these articles, that could be something as well. Somebody who is moving about the country, doesn't have a strong connection to the area, or at the very least doesn't have a strong connection to the victims, maybe even knows a little bit about their weaknesses. That could be something to explore. And right now, I would like to get to your supporter shout-outs. Anybody who makes a donation or contribution to help support the show will get a shout-out on Zodiac Monday. You can use BuyMeACoffee.com, BuyMeACoffee.com/BlackBoxNid88. There's a link to that in the description box. And you can also use the Super Thanks on YouTube. For example, there was a Super Thanks comment from River Prawn Pottery, who says, "Keep up the good work." Hey, much appreciated, River Prawn Pottery. You keep up the good work, too. And we have one as well from Batman66, who says, 179 words rhyme with Zodiac. Oh, absolutely, but there could be some wordplay that we would need to explore. But Batman66, I appreciate all your contributions to the show, not only in talking about things of this nature, but also about all the ideas that you have proposed and sending in suggestions for future episodes. And the next comment and contribution comes to us from Jeffrey D. Jones. And Jeff Jones sent this into BuyMeACoffee.com, but he also did say some encouraging things in the comment section here on YouTube. So I appreciate all of your support and your optimism, Jeff Jones, and feel free to engage with people in the comment section. Feel free to have open discussions. all is well. And our last comment and contribution comes to us from Stuart McAdam, who says, "Enjoy the coffee, Ned, once again. I can't wait to have you on my channel to discuss your journey with Black Box Online Radio." And Stuart McAdam is someone who runs his own YouTube channel talking about all kinds of subjects. A lot of it's related to the internet and programming and technology. And I definitely would love to be a guest on Stuart McAdam's channel. I would love to talk to him about Black Box Online Radio, as well as any subject under the sun or in the darkness. I think you guys can tell that mostly I'm just some guy that runs his mouth on the internet, and I invite you to do the same in the comments section down below. Please feel free to engage in the comments. And what Jeff was talking about is that, sometimes people have back and forth and exchanges. I welcome that stuff here on Black Box Online Radio in the comment section, as long as people are coming at it from a balanced and level-headed position, and there are no insults and name-calling and ridiculous tantrums that are being thrown. But that happens very rarely. Sometimes it does on Black Box Online Radio, but very rarely. Thank you so much to everybody who has made a contribution to help this program. And one more time, please visit the channel Stuart McAdam here on YouTube. I mean, you've seen the name on the screen, but StuartMacadam, Stuart McAdam. And moving on to the next segment here, I would like to talk about the 1964 Swindle murders and an alternative suspect in them. In February of 1964, Johnny Ray and Joyce Swindle were murdered in Southern California, and there's a rather odd turn that their story takes, because one of the suspects is somebody whom I've mentioned on this channel before, and his name is Michael Lee Gambrill. He was the perpetrator of the Gambrill Axe murders, not in California, but in Illinois. And I came across an article that I hadn't read before by Troy Taylor, who actually posted this for Advocate of the Dead. That is a page on Facebook, and I'm going to read that for you here one more time. This was written by Troy Taylor, just citing the source. "Knowing that the people on this list have a bit of a skewed way of looking at things, I thought it might be a perfect place to put out the word about a house in Decatur, Illinois. It is called the Hatchet House. There is likely no murder case in Decatur's history as sensational as the Gambrill Hatchet House, where murders took place in 1964. There is also no other case that is so seldom talked about. Younger people in Decatur have never heard of this startling, brutal, and bloody set of murders, and the older people who remember the case rarely discuss it. It was an event that stunned the people of Decatur, and most people would rather forget. On the morning of March 2nd, 1964, the bodies of 3 members of a Decatur family were found hacked to death in their home on South 32nd Street. Everett L. Gambrill, age 49, his wife Mary, age 46, their daughter Annabelle, age 13, were all found in their beds, likely murdered in their sleep, and police believe that they were attacked with either a hatchet or a hand axe. Their bodies were discovered at 9:30 a.m. by the Reverend David McConaughey and Patrolman John Corley. McConaughey, a pastor of Woodlawn Presbyterian Church, said that he had been contacted when Everett Gambrill had not shown up for work at the Enterprise School, located a short distance from his home on South Country Club Road. Ordinary, Gambrill arrived at work as he did every day at 7 a.m. When he did not show up, the school office tried to telephone his home, and after not receiving an answer, Gerald Weatherford, a 5th-grade teacher, and William Spencer, a substitute custodian, drove to the Gambrill residence. The 2 men returned to the school and notified the police. McConaughey became worried when he heard about Gambrill's absence. He had also not come to church on Saturday afternoon, where he worked, and the family had not attended the Sunday services, which was usual for them to attend. The police would soon learn that the Gambrills had been killed on Friday night in their blood-soaked beds, and they stayed there until Monday morning. On Tuesday, March 3rd, the killer's name was revealed: Michael Gambrill, the son and brother of the murder victims. Gambrill was absent without leave from the Marine Corps and was arrested in Boynton Beach, Florida on March 2nd, and admitted to killing his family. He fled to Florida on Friday night after the killings, and he told authorities in Florida that he wasn't sure why he became enraged to murder his family. Ordinarily, he was reported to have said that the only time he became excited was when he listened to bongo records. I kid thee not, that's what it says. And I wasn't playing bongo records when I got home, Gambrill said. And I have talked about this in a previous Zodiac Killer news report. This is just a different article that I have uncovered. And I misspoke once when I said that there was a crime that took place in Florida committed by Michael Gambrill. I mean, as you heard very clearly in that article, all of this took place in Decatur, Illinois, and then he fled to Florida. And prior to being stationed Well, prior to being in Illinois, he was stationed in the San Diego area in Southern California. And in February of 1964, Johnny Ray and Joyce Swindle are murdered there, and the real connection appears to be that there was this homicidal maniac in Southern California, very close to where the Swindles were murdered. Could he have been the perpetrator? Now, different method, not killing by gun, these were killing by axe. And this, the story of Michael Gambrell, though, seems to be one where he appears to be a very disturbed young individual. I don't know if some type of incident happened to him in the Marine Corps or not, but that I definitely would lean toward that my instincts go that way. He had been picked up almost by accident. He had been walking along U.S. Route 1 around 9:30 p.m. and was stopped by Police Sergeant William Hamilton and questioned. Gambrell said that he was a Marine but failed to show his leave papers and was taken to jail. While sitting in police headquarters, he blurted out a confession that he had slain his parents at their home in Decatur. Officers immediately notified the Decatur police, and Gambrell was held in until Decatur detectives could bring him back to Illinois. And that does take place in Florida. And yes, ultimately he would be extradited back to Illinois, and he even waived any sort of right that was preventing him from doing that. And then Michael Gambrell's going to have somewhat of a breakdown, as we see. I'm very, very, very sorry. My parents were always nice to me, Gambrell said during his statements. The 18-year-old sobbed as he spoke of the events leading to the slaying of his family. Gambrell, a private first class in the Marine Corps, said that he had left base in San Diego because he wanted to come home and plead with his parents to allow him to get a British passport. He asked them repeatedly by mail to get the passport so that he could return to Ireland, where he had been born. Now, this is something that I think is the absolute most bizarre aspect of the entire story. He wants to get a British passport to return to Ireland, where he was born, except for the fact that Michael Gambrell was not born in Ireland. I don't know if that was just some story that his family told him, but this article here, as well as everything else about him, states that he was born in England, not Ireland. So he wasn't even born in Ireland. I'm really not sure where the origin of this. I'll even get to I'll jump ahead to the part where it says that Michael had been born in England and he wanted to get out of the Marine Corps and saw this as a way to do it, but his father objected. I'm really not sure why he's saying that he was born in Ireland. Maybe he was just making up some story to the police officers because he wanted some type of just to kind of spin a web of lies, so to speak. Gambrell was very dissatisfied with his time in the Marine Corps. He enlisted in September of 1963, and he went to boot camp in San Diego. He was then assigned to Camp Pendleton for infantry training, and then later reassigned to San Diego for training in the communications and electronics schools, and later dropped out of the school for academic reasons, and was given temporary duty in the mess hall. He returned to Decatur to plead his case for the passport once again. Gambrell fared no better arguing with his parents after he returned home. On the Friday night of the murder, his family went to bed around 11 p.m. He told his parents that he wanted to stay up and watch a horror movie on television. When the movie was over, he started to go to bed, but then standing in the darkness, the emotions he had apparently suppressed for most of his life finally boiled over and out of control, triggering a flash of real-life violence that was far worse than anything he had watched on television, and ended in a bloodbath that sickened the police officers who discovered it a few days later. And the important part to remember is, absolutely, the horror movie is not something to be blamed for this. I think that there was either some incident that happened in the Marine Corps that was very, very abusive toward him that we don't know about, or that his overall mental health was just deteriorating. And Gambrell told the detectives that he felt terrible about what he had done, and he decided to commit suicide. He purchased sleeping pills to commit suicide. He purchased them in a drugstore and swallowed 10 of them, hoping that they would kill him. But he awoke the next morning with a terrible headache instead. He got dressed and drove the car south to Fort Pierce, ending up with a flat tire outside of U.S. Route 1. He discovered that there were no spare tires or equipment in the car's trunk, so he decided to hitchhike south. He rode in 3 separate cars before he made it down to Boynton Beach, and he stopped to talk to someone under a bridge, and he also wanted to discuss something with the man who warned him that he shouldn't be walking on the streets at night because the police might pick him up. The man kindly gave him $1.50, that's $1.50 for the bus fare, and Gambrell was waiting for a bus when Sergeant William Hamilton picked him up. Once he was at the police station, Gambrell fell apart and confessed to the murders. 2 days later, Michael Gambrill was back in Decatur, Illinois. The detectives had flown him back to Indianapolis, where they met him in an unmarked police car, and that drove them to Decatur. Gambrill's face was set as he walked through a group of reporters and photographers, and when he reached the Macon County Jail, he was clad in corduroy pants, a sports shirt, and black suede shoes, which he exchanged for a set of jailhouse coveralls and slippers. While funeral services were being held for his parents and sister at the Dawson and Wilkoff Funeral Home, Gambrill was being photographed and fingerprinted at the jail. A half hour later, he was taken before a magistrate, James R. Palmer, who explained his rights, and Gambrill entered pleas of not guilty to the 3 charges of murder against him. The not guilty pleas were mandatory on Palmer's part, since he did not have the authority to accept a guilty plea on a murder charge. He ordered Gambrill to be held without bond. The state was represented during the arraignment by the state's attorney, Basil Grenias. Although Gambrill did not yet have an attorney, a public defender was later appointed to his case. Ultimately, Michael Gambrill would be found guilty of the crimes, and Michael Gambrill stood while the sentence was passed, showing no emotion at the judge's words he had received when the judge believed what amounted to a life sentence in prison, but Gambrill didn't seem to care. This was puzzling, but not as puzzling as the fact that still, after all of this, a motive for the murders seemed unclear. Gambrill never told the investigators why he killed his family, and he refused to provide a reason to the state doctors who examined him during medical exams. So far, the only reason that has truly been shared is that he was dealing with this passport issue, that he didn't like his life in the Marine Corps, and he's engaged in a lot of family disputes, and that they're just simply not cooperating with what he wants them to do. They are not cooperating with what he wants them to do, rather, and then there was just a moment of rage. There are incidents in the true crime world where people have these types of outbursts, and they murder family members. I've even talked about one on this channel. It's called Sledgehammer, the Murder of Melanie Davis. It's an episode that was actually discussed on the Dr. Phil show and popularized by that program. The perpetrator named Zachary Davis was featured on that program, and the victim in the case was named Melanie Davis, his own mother. And also, I remember one of the stories on one of those countdown sites that was talking about most horrific audio recordings ever, or something to that effect. And it was the story of a boy that claimed he was sleepwalking and just shot both of his parents and murdered them. And he was found guilty because they said there's no way he could have shot both of his parents while sleepwalking. The sound of the gun would have woken him up. People do have these moments of rage, and they murder family members while they are sleeping. And I'm expecting that it really is probably the tension that has been experiencing that Michael Gambrill was experiencing about this passport dispute. And also, as this article by Troy Taylor points out very clearly, he probably dealt with a lot of these feelings for his entire life, and it was an outburst, a powder keg, it was an explosion of destructive emotion. But you'll note very clearly that he murdered his sister as well, who shouldn't have had any real involvement in the passport decision, but she became an unfortunate victim as well. And this article also talks about the Swindle murder, saying that Johnny Ray and Joyce Swindle were indeed murdered. They were gunned down in Ocean Beach near San Diego. Johnny Ray Swindle was from Alabama. Joyce Swindle was his newly married wife. And Michael Lee Gambrill denied all involvement with that. They were simply looking at him as a suspect because they wanted to just look at who could have committed that crime. I wanted to see if there was any possibility that this homicidal maniac who has been moving around the country could have done that just before he had left San Diego in February. And again, the Gambrill Axe murders took place in March of that year, the early part of March. But he was cleared in the investigation. However, I think the only thing that would stand for Michael Gambrill being a suspect in the Swindle murders would be that just because somebody is cleared in an investigation does not mean that they are purely innocent. People can be deceived. I mean, how many law enforcement individuals and psychiatrists interviewed this guy and they still couldn't figure out why he murdered his family? Well, that goes to show that their methods are not perfect. Now, it's possible, but I think he's a rather weak suspect for the Swindle murders, and it's not like anybody's truly trying to pin it onto him now. This is just a moment during the investigation, because they had the Domingos Edwards murders in 1963, where Robert Domingos and Linda Edwards were murdered near Gaviota Beach, and part of the why they were investigating the Swindle murders so closely is because they wanted to find out if a serial killer was operating in Southern California. Some people believe that was the Zodiac killer, and there are other people who believe that these could have been lone wolf incidents, or it could have been some 19-year-old guy like Michael Lee Gambrell murdering Johnny Ray and Joyce Swindle. But what do you think? Do you think there's any chance at all that Michael Gambrell was a suspect, or should be the prime suspect in the Swindle murders? Yes, he was a suspect, but do you think that he should be a strong suspect or a weak suspect for the Swindle murders? And one more time, this article was written by Troy Taylor for Advocate of the Dead. It was actually talking about how they were trying to sell the house where the Gambrell family lived in Decatur, Illinois. And Michael Gambrell would go on to serve several decades in prison, and he was released on December 5th of 2005, and really has stayed absolutely out of the light since then. And that's another thing that I hadn't read previously when I had talked about Michael Gambrell on the previous Zodiac Killer news reports, that he had been released from prison in 2005. But I think that it was, just closing a dark chapter in the history of Illinois. But that will be all for me now. Anybody can write the show at BlackBoxOnlineRadio at AOL.com. You can also get me on Facebook. My personal Facebook is in the description box, and there is always BlackBoxNid88 over on Instagram. And I will see you there for the bonus podcast. Until next time.